Evacuation warnings go into effect in just a few hours in those burn areas.
Residents say they have done what they can to protect their homes and from potential debris flows and mudslides. KTLA 5's Carlos Herrera live now along PCH in Malibu with the latest. Carlos, good morning.
Chris and Megan, good morning. Really coming down pretty hard this morning in Malibu on Pacific Coast Highway and Carbon Canyon Road. As expected, this storm is delivering and in the peak hours, it'll get even stronger, heavier rainfall as well. There's a lot of concern this morning over these charred hillsides. We know they burned just a few weeks ago, and many are concerned that these hillsides will come crumbling down onto local roads and homes in these neighborhoods. Of course, we know local officials, those Caltrans public works crews, they've been hard at work preparing for this storm, which is expected to be more severe than the last round. Crews have been rushing to clear out more than 100 basins designed to catch mud rocks and other debris from tumbling into these neighborhoods. They have also installed thousands of sandbags, K-rails, berms to keep dangerous debris from flowing into storm drains and out into the ocean. Now, the big question is, will it be enough for folks here? Steve Foster thinks so. He and his son Colton have kept a very close eye over their community in the Palisades since the fire broke out about a month ago. They're staying put for now, looking after their neighbors' homes.
We're keenly aware of the fact that there's risk to our neighbors' homes up at the top of our hill.
We became a real community when it came to prepping the last time it rained and left everything up from last time, so we're hoping it holds pretty well this time around.
We're hunkered down and ready to survive for a week if there's landslides that lock us in. We have plenty of fuel, water, electricity, and food.
Officials hope most don't stay put due to the high risk of life-threatening flooding and fast-moving debris flows. Many Palisades residents have already been notified that they will be under an evacuation warning beginning at 7 a.m. In the city of Malibu, those neighborhoods include Carbon Canyon, Las Flores Creek, and Carbon Beach. People have been asked to gather items such as medications, important documents, pets, pack a go bag, and be ready to leave at any moment. Supervisor Lindsay Horvath yesterday saying everyone in this area should be on high alert. An evacuation warning will remain in effect through 2 p.m. tomorrow. Once it goes into effect at 7 a.m., PCH will remain closed to the public except for essential workers through at least 2 p.m. Tomorrow. Again, the peak of the storm, Chris and Megan, just a few hours away, and a lot of fear in this area. We'll send it back to you.
All right, Carlos, thank you. Evacuation warnings are in effect in parts of Altadena this morning in the burn zone of the Eaton fire. Residents are scrambling to protect their homes from what is expected to be this very damaging storm. Homeowners trying to prevent more damage to their neighborhoods already devastated by the wildfires. They're stocking up on sandbags.
Trying to get ready for this mudslide that may possibly reach this way, any evacuation and come through for this storm situation. We're prepared. We're getting things together here.
LA County Public Works officials say thousands of K-rails and sandbags are now in place to prevent debris flows from blocking the street.
Officials have also issued an evacuation warning for people living near the Sunset Fire Burn area in the Hollywood Hills. It impacts those living just east and south of Runyon Canyon. The warning goes into effect at 7 a.m. It'll last through 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Remember, an evacuation warning means there is the potential threat to life and property. So if you require additional time to evacuate, you should leave now. An evacuation order means everyone must leave now due to an immediate threat to life.
And it should be noted you will not be let back in until that evacuation order is lifted. All right, an evacuation warning has also been issued in the Hearst fire burn area. It impacts Olive Lane and the Oak Ridge Mobile Home Park. Houses in the warning area that are at a higher risk of danger will be visited by the LAPD with specific evacuation orders. And this reminder,
President Trump is officially the new chairman of the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts.
He was elected by a board that excluded 18 Democratic appointees purged last week. New board members include the vice president's wife, Usha Vance, Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, and White House Deputy Chief of Staff Dan Scavino. News 4's Jackie Benson has reaction from attendees, performers, and the Kennedy family.
I really don't want to see any changes. I like it how it is.
This couple just attended a dress rehearsal performance at the Kennedy Center. The striking white building on the banks of the Potomac River is the National Cultural Center of the United States, a memorial to assassinated President John F. Kennedy. Authorized through an act of Congress, the center represents a public-private partnership almost entirely funded through ticket sales and gifts from individuals, corporations, and private foundations. The Kennedy Center has now announced that President Donald Trump is the new chairman, replacing David M. Rubenstein. The press release notes Mr. Trump was elected by a board that includes 14 new members, all of whom were appointed by him. In a social media post, the president criticized the Kennedy Center for having, quote, featured drag shows specifically targeting our youth, linking the trustee terminations to one of his central targets of shutting down diversity, equity, and inclusion programming. The move brings reaction from Kennedy family members. Tim Shriver, nephew of the late president, told News 4 in a statement, "The Kennedy Center is our nation's tribute to President Kennedy. It must focus on celebrating creativity and inspiration through the bold and fearless voices of our nation's artists."
The Kennedy Center is one of those places that you just dream of just performing in or just walking into. It just takes your breath away when you walk in.
Bold and fearless describes drag performer Tara Hoot, who has in the past done a story time reading for children at one of the Kennedy Center's smaller venues.
It's a place where art is created, and art is beautiful, and it's gorgeous, and it's thought-provoking, and it's diverse, and it's just a place that I feel celebrated and love walking in those doors.
Tara Hoot's official Instagram has announced a tongue-in-cheek campaign for chair of the Kennedy Center, and a protest is being planned. Jackie Benson, News 4.
Now, the move also included the ouster of Kennedy Center President Deborah Rutter. Today, television producer and screenwriter Shonda Rhimes resigned her position on the Kennedy Center board, and two Kennedy Center advisors, opera star Renee Fleming and musician Ben Folds, also resigned. Now, we reached out to the Kennedy Center for comment. We have not yet heard back.
Maybe steer our conversation in three directions. The first is we're going to talk about DOGE.
We do need to delete entire agencies as opposed to leave part of them behind. Because if you leave part of them behind, it's easy. It's kind of like if leaving a weed. If you don't remove the roots of the weed, then it's easy for the weed to grow back. But if you remove the roots of the weed, it doesn't stop weeds from ever growing back, but it makes it harder. So we have to really delete entire agencies, many of them. We really have here rule of the bureaucracy as opposed to rule of the people, democracy. So in order, we want to restore rule of the people. And so what that means is reducing the size of the federal government, basically reducing regulation. There's a tremendous amount of over-regulation that's happened over time.
U.S. President Donald Trump's call to his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin to stop the Ukraine war is resetting the equation of the U.S. with its European allies. NATO members who have supported Ukraine till date are now staring at a new reality. And 4 members of Trump's team are in Europe currently on a mission, spelling it out for them. First off, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance is reaching the German city of Munich for the Security Conference on Friday, alongside U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is in Ukraine to secure an agreement for rare earth minerals, oil and gas in exchange for aid. While U.S. Defense Chief Pete Hegseth is in Brussels to assert Trump's demand for increased EU defense spending, while defending Trump's peace plan for Ukraine, Hegseth has already stated that the return to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders was not realistic.
There is no betrayal there. There is a recognition that the whole world and the United States is invested and interested in peace, a negotiated peace. As President Trump has said, stopping the killing. And so that will require both sides recognizing things they don't want to. That's why I think the world is fortunate to have President Trump. Only he at this moment could convene the powers that be to bring peace, and that's a welcome sign.
NATO members, including Germany and Sweden, are not pleased with Trump's plans for Ukraine. Expressing their concerns, German Defense Minister Pistorius said he regretted that the U.S. administration had already made what he called concessions to Russia even before the talks had started.
It is regrettable, and I say this myself, but it is part of the truth. The Trump administration has already made public concessions to Putin before negotiations have even begun. In my view, it would have been better to talk about Ukraine's possible NATO membership or the country's possible loss of territory at the negotiating table first, and not take it off the table beforehand. However, if a peace treaty between Russia and Ukraine is reached quickly, which I would very much welcome, we cannot and must not simply sit back and relax. Everyone in Europe must be fully aware of this. It is important that the
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, on the other hand, said any peace deal in Ukraine must be enduring and that any discussions must include Kyiv.
What we have seen yesterday was the statements coming out of Washington, including, and you forget to mention that, his long phone call with President Zelensky. So we will see how this progresses from now on, step by step. Of course, it is crucial. We talk about Ukraine, that Ukraine is closely involved in everything happening about Ukraine.
On Wednesday, the foreign ministers of France and Spain insisted that any peace deal in Ukraine could not be achieved without the involvement of Kyiv and its European partners. Spain's foreign minister Álvarez Buono said that they want an end to the unjust war to end with a just peace. Even as Poland's foreign minister said that the continued cooperation with the US is a topic of discussion among the European allies.
Well, President Donald Trump now pushing for a diplomatic end to the war between Russia and Ukraine, and he says he plans to meet face-to-face with Russia's president. And elsewhere in D.C., the White House just announced a big change to its program to shrink the federal workforce. Let's go to our correspondent Jared Hill with more.
I think they have to make peace.
President Donald Trump says negotiations will begin immediately toward ending Russia's war with Ukraine. At the swearing in of his new director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, the president said he spoke to leaders of both countries on the phone yesterday and told reporters he plans to meet face-to-face with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
We expect that he'll come here and I'll go there, and we're going to meet also probably in Saudi Arabia the first time.
President Trump was non-committal on a sit-down with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. Zelensky later said that he and Trump had a good conversation, adding that he believes America's power can pressure Putin toward peace. But in a big shift from the previous administration, the U.S. signaled a reversal on support of Ukraine's bid for NATO membership, and now says the country may have to give up territory to Russia.
We must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective.
Back at home, a federal judge ended his hold on Trump's deferred resignation program for federal workers. The administration says nearly 75,000 federal workers had already signed up for the so-called buyout, which offers full pay and benefits through September to those who voluntarily leave their positions. The White House, though, says that offer is now off the table for anyone who hasn't already signed up. Jared Hill, CBS News.
And Vice President J.D. Vance and other U.S. leaders are expected to meet with Ukraine's president this week at a security conference in Munich, Germany.
Continued cooperation with U.S. administration is an important topic of our discussions. There is no better guarantee for the security of our continent than close transatlantic cooperations. But Europe should do more and more for its own defense, both for the sake of the alliance and for our own sakes.
Ce qui se joue, ce n'est pas seulement l'intégrité territoriale de l'Ukraine, ce n'est pas simplement la sécurité du continent européen, c'est aussi et plus généralement l'avenir du droit international, parce qu'abandonner l'Ukraine, forcer l'Ukraine à la capitulation, ça serait consacrer définitivement la loi du plus fort et ça serait adresser une invitation à tous les despotes et les tyrans de la planète à envahir leurs voisins en toute impunité.
Tonight, the Trump administration continues to carry out its crackdown on illegal immigration.
There are some major new developments as the White House celebrates achievements, and at the same time, critics mount major legal challenges to their actions.
National correspondent Christine Frizzell has more.
New signs the Trump administration's crackdown isn't only on illegal immigration, but on those tasked with carrying out the mission to stop it. 2 top ICE officials removed from their jobs, despite enforcement arrests being 3 times higher than last year, according to the White House.
3 times higher is good, but I'm not satisfied. There's more criminal aliens that need to be arrested, hundreds of thousands.
Recent arrests include these 2 Venezuelan migrants, just indicted along with 6 others in the Nashville area for operating a sex trafficking ring. First luring women into the United States, then using their ties to the gang Tren de Aragua to intimidate them and take their money.
We will not stand by and allow TDA or any criminal organization to get a stronghold in Tennessee.
Meanwhile, top officials in Texas say their crackdown in immigration has been going on for years, and they want their money back. A Texas congressman has just introduced a bill asking for the federal government to pay the state $11 billion for its enhanced border security measures as part of Operation Lone Star.
I know Governor Abbott was here in Washington, D.C. and told President Trump that he would like to have the federal government reimburse Texas for what should have been a federal government expense, but was borne by Texas taxpayers because, frankly, the federal government was asleep at the wheel.
The request could trigger more, including from cities like New York, which spent $3.7 billion last year on asylum seeker shelter and services. Most of the migrants sent to the city by bus from Texas, with hints of coming cooperation between the Big Apple and the federal government. Another meeting between border czar Tom Homan and New York City Mayor Eric Adams set for later this week. I'm Christine Frizzell reporting.
Criminals and suspected gang members aren't the only immigrants being transported to Guantanamo Bay ahead of their planned deportation. According to both internal government documents and U.S. officials, the Trump administration is also sending nonviolent detainees who do not have serious criminal records, or in some cases, any criminal records at all. The Department of Homeland Security confirmed this information after it was exclusively reported by CBS News. And the guy who broke that story, Camilo Montoya Galvez, joins us now. Camilo, what other details can you tell us exactly about these so-called low-risk detainees and how they're ending up at Guantanamo Bay?
Well, look, Ed, the Trump administration so far has transported about 100 Venezuelan migrant detainees to Guantanamo Bay, which, of course, President Trump has instructed officials to essentially convert into a massive detention center to hold people awaiting deportation, in this case to Venezuela. We know that the Trump administration recently brokered an agreement to have Venezuela send its own planes to the U.S. to pick up its nationals and to send them back to Venezuela. But so far, there has been no arrangement announced that would allow Venezuela to transport its nationals from Guantanamo Bay back to Venezuela. So it's really unclear when these detainees will be released and deported to Venezuela. What is really important to note from our reporting, Ed, is that despite the administration's messaging that this would be a facility used to detain the worst and the worst, and I quote, we also know now, as you mentioned, that the administration has also been sending migrants who are deemed to pose a low risk. What does that mean? Well, these are migrants who are in the U.S. illegally, yes, and are facing deportation, but otherwise do not have any serious criminal records, and they are being transported to Cuba alongside migrants who do have criminal records and suspected gang members, but they are being housed separately in distinct areas in that naval base in Guantanamo, Ed.
Can you remind us how many migrants total are being held there right now, and what's the ultimate end goal? How many do they want to put there?
So right now, there are about 100 Venezuelan migrants held at Guantanamo Bay. The administration has been sending a daily flight from the Texas border to Guantanamo Bay, each carrying about 15 detainees, and so about a dozen each day. That number could increase in the coming days, we are told, and the president's objective ultimately, he has said, is to house up to 30,000 immigrant detainees at this facility. which of course, Ed, would be a massive expansion of immigration detention at a time when ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, is currently over capacity and having to release some people it is arresting, Ed, because it doesn't have the physical space to actually hold people who are arrested and awaiting deportation.
And why just migrants from Venezuela again?
Well, because Venezuela right now is not accepting American deportation flights.
Right.
And Venezuelans,
Okay.
as you know, made up a big portion of the unprecedented influx in migration at the U.S.-Mexico border under the Biden administration. And they had to release hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans because of the fact that their home country would not take them back. Now, the Trump administration, in trying to achieve its mass deportation goals, is trying to remove Venezuelans, but it's running into the same diplomatic challenge that the Biden administration ran into, Ed, and that is that Venezuela still is not accepting deportees. We know that Venezuela earlier this week did again send 2 planes to El Paso to pick up about 200 Venezuelan nationals and then transported them back to Caracas, but we have heard no plans of them doing the same thing, Ed, for people in Guantanamo Bay.
Got it. All right. Camilo Montoya Galvez, we call him Scoop, and he proved again why today. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Ed.
سياسة تهجير هذه روح على مصر وحب على الأردن وحب على الكويت وحب على مش عارفين وين، لا طالعين ولا نازلين، حنضلنا هنا قاعدين على الركام وعلى الحجار وعلى الحديد وعلى الصاج، نضلنا قاعدين في بلادنا وفي غزة. لا يمكن، لو بعطينا كل الدنيا حنضلنا قاعدين في الدار هنا على باب دورنا.
والله هو ما ضلش يعني شيء واحد يبكي عليه، يعني رجعت ما رجعتش بطلت تفرق كثير يعني قعدنا سنة ونص تقريبا في الحرب وتعودنا، يعني بطلت تفرق وترجع الحرب ما ترجع الحرب. في الآخر زي ما أنت شايف لا مدخل، لا في خيام ولا في كونتينرات ولا في اسمنت ولا في مواد تموينية ولا في مازوت ولا في حاجة. وش الفائدة إنه وقفنا الحرب؟ يعني ترجع الحرب وتضلها زي ما هي عاد. إيش أفرق كثير؟ مش حتفرق كثير يعني.
عندي تخوفات من الحرب ترجع تاني، عشان هيك أنا باقي في مكاني لحين ما نشوف ايش بده يحصل من ورا ترامب. بعدين بالنسبه للتهجير احنا صامدين، بنموت هنا وما بنطلعش، ما بنردش على ترامب ولا على غير ترامب.
The breaking news out of Germany, where at least 28 people were injured after a man drove into a crowd in Munich this morning. Right now, the driver, a 24-year-old Afghan man, is in police custody. During the arrest, police fired a shot at the vehicle. Officials described what happened as an intentional attack. We are learning that the suspect was known to police in relation to drug and theft incidents. We still don't know a motive, but there was a union rally happening during that time. This comes just one day before world leaders are set to gather at the Munich Security Conference tomorrow. We will bring you developments as they happen.
Dann hat sich von hinten ein Fahrzeug genähert, ist aufgeschlossen zum Polizeifahrzeug, hat dann auf Höhe des Polizeifahrzeugs angesetzt zu überholen, hat dann beschleunigt und ist sozusagen in das Ende der Versammlung gefahren. Die Kollegen haben den Täter dann gestellt, auf das Fahrzeug ist einmal geschossen worden. Der Täter wurde festgenommen. Wir gehen momentan davon aus, dass wir mindestens 28 teils schwer verletzte Personen haben. Eine genaue Zahl der Verletzten steht bislang noch nicht fest. Zum Täter kann man momentan sagen, ist ein 24-jähriger Afghane, vom Status her ein Asylbewerber. Auch nähere Hintergründe dazu kann ich Ihnen momentan noch nicht sagen. Das müssen dann die Ermittlungen ergeben.
长官，12楼还有人吗？有一个欧卡的。这不是现在还有几个伤者，是不是？
And today's the day the White House says the president will sign off on reciprocal tariffs. Now, he wants the U.S. to effectively match the ones other nations impose on U.S. goods. It comes as the latest CPI report shows inflation rose 3% year over year last month. That's higher than expected and above the Federal Reserve's target. Many economists worry potential trade wars could amplify inflation even more.
Economists would say the tariffs are going to be inflationary.
Tariffs could be viewed as inflationary, especially if there are reciprocal tariffs.
Now, President Trump disagrees, saying tariffs raise money balance trade and serve as leverage. His administration adds that he has a broader plan to curb inflation.